I have this approach, which I often call think small. And I think very often you can find very good solutions that work for you, not for everyone, but work very well for you without the need to use a lot of power, a lot of computational resources.
Hello, welcome to Progress Reimagined. I'm your host, Kathleen Chu, and today we're going to talk about an interesting topic that affects nearly all of us. Social media timelines that seem to be designed for everything except certain our needs. What if there was a way to take back control? What if you can build your own timeline that works for you, not for advertisers or engagement matrix? And to explore this exciting new tech, I'm joined by a special guest who's been working on exactly that solution. Joining us today is Davide Hennigar, a staff machine learning engineer and a researcher at Mozilla.ai, who's leading a fascinating BYOTA project, which is Build Your Own Timeline algorithm. With experience at Twitter and various innovative projects, Davide brings unique insight into how we can shape our social media experience. Throughout his career, Davide has moved between industry and academia, and valuing both his research and teaching experiences at universities in Italy alongside his work in AI. And I believe this combination, this blend of educational function and practical application gives him a really particularly well-rounded perspective on technology. So welcome, Davide.
Hi, Kathleen. Thank you very much for both invitation and the introduction.
First question, what's that one thing in your field that many believe is true but doesn't hold up on the scrutiny?
Okay, sure. So I would have two. One is more related to social media algorithms, let's say, and another one is related to the work I'm doing now, which is mostly on large language models. It's still AI related.
Mm-hmm.
And related to social media, I would say one strong belief is that we need a huge model or a lot of computational effort and to share all our data to have a timeline which is good for us, good enough for us. And I believe this is not really true under scrutiny because, well, first of all, I tried it and I can still get something that is meaningful to me at least. But even generalizing a bit more, I think it's hard to think that some models that have been trained on metrics which are not being useful to users or being healthy for users, but rather keeping users on a given platform, it's hard to think they can actually be the best choice that we could come up with. And what I do with BYOTA is trying to provide an alternative to that. Let's say it's more like a proof of concept showing that even without sharing your own data, you can still get some kind of algorithm which is useful to you. The second point, second false truth, I would say, is thinking that some very generalist models that perform well on the main academic benchmarks or the main benchmarks and leaderboard that you can see around are always the best choice for you to solve your specific problem. In some cases, working on specific tasks and your own data, you might have good or even better results with models which are not the best ones across all the tasks, but some that are maybe smaller, that could run on your laptop perhaps, or that there are open source instead of a big closed API services such as the ones that are available today.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying basically is that powerful doesn't necessarily mean better in a
Yes.
sense.
Yes, I think that's a very good interpretation. Like I have this approach, which I often call think small. I also get to talk about this topic. And I think very often you can find very good solutions that work for you, not for everyone, but work very well for you without the need to use a lot of power, a lot of computational resources.
Interesting. So can you tell us a bit about BYOTA, Build Your Own Timeline algorithm? What does it do and what got you interested in building BYOTA?
Sure. I start from the second part, what got me interested in that. As you said before, I worked at Twitter for a while. Before that, I was working in academia. I was first in Politecnico di Milano, where I got my PhD. And then I moved to Università della Svizzera Italiana, or University of Lugano in Switzerland, still very close to the border, by the way. And over there, I worked on AI from many different aspects. And I always had kind of a higher attention, higher interest towards whatever I could use that could be applied to how people were using their systems. And this kind of uh, translated into some projects that were then exported as consultancies to companies or collaborations with companies or became startups. And the last one I worked in was Fabula AI, which was a startup whose purpose was to predict whether a given piece of news was fake news or true news, depending on how it spread on the Twitter social network. And that was how we were acquired at Twitter. And there I started working mainly on tasks that were related to conversation health. So either fake news detection, as we did before, or predicting any kind of abuses on the platform that related both to actual verbal abuses across communication on the platform, but also policy abuses such as running bots or publishing spam on the platform and so on. And while I was working there of course was a lot of interest in recommender systems and how to build a timeline that kept people on the system so you could provide better ads and more ads for them to see. And I kind of felt detached from that part of my job, which I was not directly involved in, but I knew it was within the same company I was working for. And so I started looking around for what alternatives there were of social networks that were not just centered about these dynamics that we now kind of get for granted. But I wanted to verify that and to challenge that part. And I had a very great experience, like getting closer to the Fediverse and Mastodon in specific. And I found that for a very large part, I didn't feel a need at all for an algorithm or for ads. I was very happy in the community I had found that was the one around the Mastodon.org server instance. That's specifically about free and open source software. And I found much more meaningful interactions with the users. And the only thing I kind of felt was missing, I'd say, was an algorithm, not because, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I do AI, maybe you need an algorithm there. It was more due to the fact that personally, I have a lot of fear of missing out from when I go to sleep and then I connect the following day and I feel like I might have lost something that could have been interesting for me. And so what I thought was, well, maybe the reverse chronological ordering of posts, which is an algorithm itself, might have some bias. So people who write when I'm awake have more chances to be read by me, or people who write more often might have more chances to be read. So is there a way I could direct this to something that I'm more interested in terms of contents specifically? And this is how BYOTA started. Sorry, I gave a very long explanation about the motivations.
I can see from coming from being acquired by Twitter and working on different things at Twitter, looking at detecting fake news at the same time, figuring out the algorithm and to attract users, that kind of leads you to what you do now. Yes, please continue.
Exactly. Like it's kind of a continuous narrative over there. I think also related to the fact that like I tend to do what I like and I have a lot of, I don't know, feelings about what I do and whether I should do one thing or another. And this is how BYOTA was born. Like I thought, I like the Fediverse, I like my Mastodon experience. Is there a way I could get something which is completely custom that runs on my own friends timeline? So only on the people I follow. That was the thing I was most interested in. That allows me not to lose something that might be relevant for me. And it's been a long process. It took almost 2 years, 1.5 years. I started working on this when I left Twitter. I didn't leave Twitter. I was kicked out of Twitter thanks to Elon Musk joining the company, as many other Twitter employees. But I think it was a very good time for me to start thinking about things that were meaningful to me and devoting some time to pet projects, projects that I cared about. And I think at the time there were not many resources that allowed me to do what I wanted to do. And so I kind of iterated on researching how people were doing this thing in the Fediverse specifically, and trying to look for the technologies, testing them, and checking out which results I got. What BYOTA is now is like the outcome of these plenty of iterations. And I think it now got to a point where I can like honestly say this is something feasible because we do have a way to basically describe the content of our current non-algorithmic timelines on Mastodon, and then compare this content with some references that we make available. It could be our own posts or some topics that we decide or some queries that we write, and then run algorithms on these, which run locally on our own computers without sharing any data outside and providing a different view of the information we are presented by Mastodon.
For people who don't understand what Fediverse is, would you mind explaining just briefly what Fediverse is?
Sure. So Fediverse is a social network. It's federated, and I'm going to go deeper into the detail. And it encompasses a lot of different applications that all rely on the same protocol, which is ActivityPub. So the protocol is what makes everything homogeneous and common. And then, like it happens with email, for instance, you have a single protocol, which is compatible across different servers and applications. And then you can have different email servers. And with your email server, you can register an account. And you can also communicate with people who use a different email server because they know how to contact each other. Similarly, in the Fediverse, you can have a single protocol that defines how these different servers talk. You can have different servers that also run slightly different interfaces, technologies. They allow you to share different things. One can be closer to how Twitter is, which is mostly microblogging. Another one can be more about images, like PixelFed. Another one can be, I don't know, about podcasts or blog posts or videos and so on. And all of them can talk with each other and allow people to follow other people that are registered in different servers or instances, as they call. So let's say I'm registered in the fostodon.org instance, but I can also follow people from infosec.exchange, which is another server, just by finding them in my timeline, saying I want to follow them, or directly going to their instance, searching for contents or people that I might be interested in, and then deciding to follow them.
I think the benefit of the Fediverse is the freedom and how it liberates users, doesn't it? It allows you to move around freely and without the walls that some of the tech companies tend to build to protect their own user and the flow.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's not just freedom in an abstract term, like freedom from large companies or freedom from seeing ads. It's actual freedom of even choosing to move somewhere else at any point in time. So one issue we have right now with, I would say, large big tech services, which is not just necessarily social networks, is that there's a lot of fear that by leaving them, you will lose some services, or you will lose some audience, or you will lose the chance to contact other people that are using the same service. But on the Fediverse, you can move from one instance to another and continue following the same people. You bring your social network with you as long as you move to something else that uses the same protocol. Let's say not necessarily the same instance, but still a compatible protocol. And the data is yours. You have much more choice about how to deal with your data. For instance, one thing you can choose is not to be findable by algorithms. So even if your data is shared with a server, the server owner, let's say, but the tool itself and the protocol itself is mindful to your choice and will not implement algorithms that run on your data if you explicitly chose not to be opted in this.
I see. Going back to designing, seeing a timeline that you want to see, why is having control over, so back to BYOTA, why is having control over your timeline on social media important, say to you or to users, to regular users?
Yeah. So first of all, I don't think like everyone has to change from the reverse chronological approach. And this is one thing I want to stress a lot about, like, I'm not selling, not even giving away for free a product. For me, it's really more like a proof of concept, a call for arms, as I said, Pacific call for arms. Like, I want to show that the king is naked rather than pushing a personal algorithm to people when they don't need it. And then the other reason why I think it's important for people to have something that is personal, local, and privacy preserving is, well, local because it's privacy preserving. So you don't share your own data with anyone else. And I think that's very important. Personal means that you should always also be able to choose what kind of algorithm you run. Because as I said before, even the reverse chronological has some kind of bias. And in some cases, you want to use the system differently. I think we should be empowered in using social networks the way we would use any kind of social group or social relationship computer powered tool. So we should be able to explicitly search for stuff that is meaningful to us. We should be able to look for communities of practice that are interested in a specific topic and bind with them and learn with them. Sometimes we just want to like pass time, you know? And one example I always talk about is you're waiting for the next train and you just want to check some everything nothing content. And in that case, maybe the current algorithms work nicely because you can get a lot of memes and everything. But it's not like the usage I would do of the tool all the time. And how can you serve different kind of usages? I think with
Yes.
different kind of algorithms.
Right. You raised such a wonderful point about everything, nothing content. That's basically, that describe very well the social media today. I do see random posts when I go through social media, and I think having that choice to see what you want to see is really important. It's now much more meaningful and engaging.
Yeah. And think about the case of searching, right? So a good search system is the one that allows you to find the information you're looking for in the shortest amount of time possible. How can that
Right.
work with an algorithm whose aim is to keep you on the platform as much as possible?
That's so true. Yeah, that's completely changed how you frame our expectation of social media now, right? Because when you search something, you expect to find the answer, and why our time spent on social media should be any different. It should be something that we're all very interested in, and not just random things, random content. What are some of the work, say, for example, what are some of the works that you're most proud of at Twitter? You kind of mentioned it earlier. And now at Mozilla, if you can share a little bit about your experiences.
Of course. So for the Twitter part, I think most of it boils down to the different kind of projects I worked on that I told you about before. So mostly focusing on conversation health. One of the main reasons why I was happy, well, the main reason why I joined is that they acquired us and it was a very good offer. But another very good reason why I was happy to join was that Twitter to me at the time, we speak about like 2019, was still a system where, first of all, you had an open conversation. So people not registered to Twitter could still see tweets and browse the whole system.
Right.
And then there was this idea of allowing people to communicate freely, but at the same time being able to raise whether there were any issues in the communication in terms of abusive content and behaviors. So I like this idea of an open communication platform that still provided tools to improve the quality of the conversation. And of course, it very much depends on how you use the tools and what the outcome is. But I found some of the ones I worked on very, very meaningful, especially the one related to actual abuses on the platform and the fact that you could do a lot of this work in an automatic way. And so the part that's always where people are always responsible of, that is actually choosing whether a post has to be removed from the platform or what, was aided by a tool that allowed them to look for those posts that had that, let's say, a very high precision of being actual abuses on the platform. So they basically had to check fewer posts instead of spending a lot of time just looking for something that was abusive. At Mozilla.ai, it's very different, meaning I am basically proud of every tool I'm working on at the moment. But more than like the specific tools, it's I'm very proud of the approach that we're taking, which is something we, of course, had to establish as our own way of working, our own way of doing things while the company grew. I joined it very early at the beginning. We were like 5 people. Now we're 25-ish. And I think deciding that what we do would have been open first is the thing I'm most proud of. I very much like the idea that I'm working on a tool, I'm pushing some commits to the repository at the end of the day, and those can be seen by anyone and commented by anyone. And of course, there's a lot of fear of doing things in a bad way or in the wrong way. but it also makes you more accountable. And at the same time, it makes you feel better because you know that whatever you're doing, people can chime in and tell you what they think about it.
Mm-hmm. That leads us to open source. There is a big debate now with AI and whether open source still, whether that would still be an important goal to pursue. It's becoming very difficult, I suppose. What's your view on that?
Yeah, so I know the debate. I kind of, at least emotionally, participate in that. And let's say the main point, I think, is about what it means for AI to be open source and which kind of threshold you have before you can put the open label to something that is an AI product. And I think like the trend is very different from what I was accustomed to because I come from academia, and for me being open meant being reproducible, which meant if I ever came up with something that was new and I wanted to publish that, then I had to guarantee that everyone picking up my code would have been also able to reproduce all my experiments and verify that what I did was actually that quality and that worked properly. And that meant sharing the code, sharing the data, sharing the process I followed to come up with the results that I published in the tables and everything. And to me, being open has always been like that. Now I realize with AI, I was working on AI and it worked like that. Now with LLMs, I would say it's much harder because some of these models are trained on a huge amount of GPUs, and even if you released everything, people couldn't replicate the whole process from scratch. And also, there are a lot of commercial interests behind many of these products, and the pipelines and the data are just not made public. Plus, a posteriori, you also realize that a lot of these companies trained on data they shouldn't have trained on because it was copyrighted data. And so you understand there was a reason why they didn't share all the data that was available. So this puts me in a position where I should probably say we should either go with this or it's not open source. And like the cleanest way, the most sound way to do this would be to say if it doesn't come with data and code and instructions to reproduce it, then it's not open source. But I also want to value the advantage that it has for people to take a model whose code is public, whose weights, pre-trained weights are public. So the model already has some parameters that it has learned through the training that have been made public and ready to use by people. Plus, tools are made available for people to fine-tune these weights and change them so that the model will work a bit closer to their expectations. And I think if you think about that, it's true it's not fully open because you don't know which data it was originally trained with. But to me, at the same time, it brings a lot of value to builders, to people who want to try and use AI in their own tools, as long as they know what they are doing, of course. Otherwise, if they blindly take a tool, include that into their own application without evaluations about biases and trustworthiness of the system, they will just of course, penalize their tool by adding all the weaknesses the original model has. So let's say I see a value in still saying this thing is open. Then to me, saying it's open source, it's not open source, it's just a label. And where you put the threshold is very subjective. I understand there has to be a choice. But I'm at least partially in favor of models being out, regardless of the fact whether you call them, let's say, fully open source or partially open source. Tables are there, so people can check those things regardless of whether the official label was for them to be open source or not. And it's great to have information about what is available for a given model, what you can do with that. And I'm very grateful that some of them are around because I can use them locally and check if they are a good alternative to something which is completely closed. And then, of course, I'm championing all of those projects which are fully open.
Coming from someone outside of the technology space and curious to see why is open source so important? I see so many great, amazing softwares that are open source. Why do you think that's important?
And we have to say there are also some great softwares which are not open source, and
True.
that makes it even different to understand what the value of open source is, right? So I think it's very important, like in the freedoms that you have with the code that comes with you. Like it's not just the software or the fact that you're using something which is good or bad, but it's also how you can use it. So having a software which is open source is guaranteed not to add further limitations to what you can do at a later stage, for instance. It guarantees you to check how it works if you are able, of course, to go through the code and understand what it does to make sure that it doesn't do anything unexpected. And it also allows you to start from that code and first of all, learn how it was done. So you learn to solve problems that you didn't know how to solve before, but you can also improve it to do something else. And then it will become a new software, which in many cases, thanks to many of the open source licenses that are available, will be open sources too, and will allow other people to build over what you have done that was built over what something else had done before. Again, starting from a scientist's point of view, I see this very much as a standing on the shoulder of giants thing, right? So everything that you do is based on some work that has been provided by somebody else, and it allowed you to do things more easily. So it's just right that you do the same and make things easier for other people in the future.
That's such a great way to put it, standing on the shoulder of giants. Open source sounded to me like playing jazz and you improvise building on someone else's play, but you take it into another level. It unlocks another level of creativity. Things are changing so fast and you can improvise based on someone else's play.
It's a good point, especially what you said about things changing so quickly. Like, I've been accustomed to the pace of things changing, but I'm overwhelmed by how quickly things are changing in the last few years. And I think for many things, like I would have never been able to write something from scratch if I had to study everything and then write and then have a final product there. It would have really been difficult with me if I couldn't rely on something that was already built that was open source. And I think the problem here is for things not just to be open, but also to be more interpretable and inspectable, and also to be more interoperable, which are two things that I value a lot, especially in the current, let's say, generative AI scenario. Meaning, even if you share the data and the code and the process to replicate everything from a model, even if somebody does this, they will still not be able to tell you precisely why a model answers in a given way when you ask it a given question. The why is part of the internal parts of these models, which very often are not inspected thoroughly, not even by the people who build that, right? So being able to have tools for understanding these models better is very important, in my opinion. Yeah, I think these are interoperability was the second part. The more you build components which can work well together with others, the more people are empowered to build new tools and customize and everything. Because in some cases, again, you can start from somebody else's code, but if that is a component you can kind of use out of the box in a standard way, then you get a lot of value from that.
Speaking about AI, can you tell us a bit about becoming an expert in the space?
Oh, yeah. So, like, the first AI thing I did was, well, let's say the first relevant probably I think I did was my master thesis. And it was AI related because it was on description logics. And the main idea was how can we make a computer reason on concepts as explained by a person using a specific kind of logic that allows the computer to do actual rational reasoning, not a statistical, not deterministic one, but something which is very concrete and rational. And that was how I kind of entered serious AI stuff rather than just tinkering with that. And then from that, I moved to semantic web, which was kind of a natural continuation of this. And then from semantic web, I changed research group and I moved to computer vision. And I was lucky enough that was the moment where computer vision started to move from, I would say, handcrafted descriptors and mostly optimization-based solutions to your problems to neural networks. So I was very much exposed to whatever deep learning and whatever has become the basis for the current AI models. And then from then deep learning on graphs, and then eventually LLMs. So I kind of saw, well, not it all, but I saw a good part of it.
So, based on your experience, how would a healthy adoption of AI technology look to you?
So I would recall the standing on the shoulder of giants part. I hope it doesn't
Mm.
sound too obvious, but me, I would say in progress in general, in science, in AI in specific, like being able to build not as a way of competing with other people to try and get the product the earlier, the better, without sharing what you do, because then it becomes a liability in terms of competition. Instead, sharing, working together, progressing all together is to me probably the best way of tackling these kind of problems. I also
Mm.
understand the value of somebody raising a lot of money, going along in a single direction, super focused, and being 10 steps ahead of everyone else. And then everyone feels like they have to do, and they try and
Mm.
catch up with this. But if what you do is not shared, basically from, let's say, a humanity perspective point of view, if what you do and you learn, you don't share, somebody else will have to work on this again. And I don't see it as a sustainable way of progressing. It's a sustainable way of making a company, because then that company will make money because it's the only one that offers a product.
Someone from LinkedIn raised a really interesting question, which is, what does progress actually mean, right? You mentioned it. What is, I think it means different things for different people. Maybe for some people it means a lot of money, making a lot of profit. But I think for some of us it has a deeper meaning. And in your case, what does progress mean to you, and how does the intentional use of technology play a role in a more equitable world?
Yeah. So from, let's say, the progress interpretation point of view, as you've already understood, I'm not the one who goes for money or who's able to make money, unfortunately. I'm very much more about like see progress as something that you do together with others and not in isolation. So in some cases, you can make it sustainable. In other cases, you just share what you do and be grateful of what you see other people accomplishing, which is also a very good way of like enjoying progress as a human, part of the rest of the world. And there was something else about like the equitable use of AI. So how can this be equitable? I think there are many things that happen with AI specifically, I would say with technology in general, that very often we tend to build something which is not, again, something for everyone. The typical approach is like, well, where is the money in that? Where is the 20% of the people who give us 80% of the money out of this product? Like, who should we serve first?
Mm.
I think in general, thinking about solutions that might work, even with people that don't bring you money, is helping with progress. Like BYOTA doesn't bring money, that's assured. But the thing is, I wanted to verify and check that I could say this work locally, even on a computer that's not my laptop that has been bought last year. I wanted to try it on all their hardware because if I share something that's supposedly usable by people, it should be usable by people, right? So I tried it on a 2016 old Mac that I had, my personal laptop, let's say. I tried it on a Raspberry Pi, which is a less than $100 computer, and it runs
Right.
over there too. So
For what?
again, thinking small first is something that allows you to, at least in my opinion, allows you to do something that can be meaningfully shared without blocking some people from trying and accessing this kind of technology.
Based on what I learned about BYOTA, is that thinking small is really powerful way to kind of reframe the whole thing. You kind of share a little bit about how you design BYOTA and how you turn the narrative around about going big, and but you go against that narrative and you're thinking small, and it's actually sometimes it may be even better for the users. They may not need the most powerful tools, and perhaps what they need is something you mentioned before, more specialized timeline that's good for them.
Yes, so I think in general, technological solutions, commercial technological solutions, are built to tackle not the long queue, but the first part of the customers, the ones that bring you most of the money, right?
Mm.
I think thinking small is like empowering people to autonomously or scalably, let's say, tackle the long queue. I think that's also the reason why BYOTA itself is not a product that is ready to be used by people. It's still more like a playground for people who want to build other applications on this. But again, as a proof of concept, I wanted to focus on something that ran locally, and it uses AI, but it uses models that were kind of, first of all, that you could choose and swap if you were not happy with those, but also that were powerful enough to bring you some value, but at the same time not so powerful that you couldn't run them on any hardware. And this is where I had to spend some time. Let's say you have three main components in BYOTA. One of them allows you to get contents from your social network. And for now, I only focused on Mastodon. So you have mastodon.py, which is a library that allows you to download posts from your timeline, the reverse chronological one. And then you have Llama which is another tool built by Mozilla. It's basically a local large language model engine. It's an engine, it's not a specific model because you can use it to run many different kind of models locally on your own hardware. And it's based on another tool called Llama CPP and a very nice polyglot compiler, which is called Cosmopolitan. All of this to say, it's a single file that you double click and starts an LLM or any kind of, let's say, language model, even not very large, on your computer, regardless of the operating system or the architecture of your computer. So the same identical file will work on Windows, Mac, Raspberry Pi again, like Linux, of course, many different platforms. So the model I chose to run inside Llama is called AllMiniLM. And it's a relatively old, but rather good embedding model. Embeddings are what I called before as descriptors of your post. Just think about very long numbers that you can kind of, as you do with numbers in a 2D space, and you plot them somewhere in this space. These have way more than just 2 dimensions. They have hundreds of them. And the most important principle is that if you have 2 posts that talk about similar things, there will be points that are close in this multi-dimensional space.
Right.
And it basically does 99% of the work. And you give it your post, you have these numbers, and then you say, given this number, tell me others which are close to this, and it will tell you the posts which are most similar to a given. And of course, all of these has to be programmed and is made available by Python code. The way I wanted to expose this to users was via Marimo, I'm sorry if I mispronounce it, which is a beautiful, relatively new notebook environment for Python developers. And the part I enjoy the most, there are 2 parts I enjoy the most about this. One is that it has very powerful UI components. You build something in Python, but you don't show the Python to the user. You can even just show them a user interface and they will see a website and test your system immediately. And the other thing that's really super is that it allows you to compile this code in a way that will run directly in your browser without the need of a server to run your code. So in the current web application environments, what you usually do is you connect to a server, you see something in your browser, but everything you click and act on is going to go back to the server and do some stuff over there. Like in this specific case, you just have this WebAssembly code that runs in your browser. You will never go out of your computer. You will hit your local Llama file model and then do everything in a completely local fashion.
That sounds really cool. I will link it in the show notes. You gave a really great talk of how the dots were connected. And yes, I'll link that in the show notes. I think it's a good time to talk about like Mozilla's Lumigator and Blueprints.
Surely.
And those are the 2 things I think they're really, really helpful, and they're completely free, open source,
Yes,
right?
they are. Yes.
And if you can share a little bit about that and why are they special?
Of course. So Lumigator is a tool that allows you to make informed decision about which model to use to solve a very specific task on a very specific data set. This kind of boils down to what I said before, like we would like to see if there is a chance that a different model from, I don't know, GPT or Claude or Mistral, something that we could run perhaps locally or perhaps in our own cloud, but that we have control on, and see if this something has a performance that is good enough for us. Like good enough is also something that's very personal, right? It's very think small approach, because you can say this model passes all of these benchmarks, but if I can spend 1/10 and have something that passes one benchmark less, which I'm not interested in, then I'm perfectly fine with that anyway. So this is how Lumigator started as a tool to allow people to do evaluations of language models. So what you can do now, you can take right now there are two main tasks, summarization and translation. You can take your own data and ask to summarize or translate it. And you can ask Lumigator to evaluate how good different models are with respect to this task on your own data. Your data stays with you. It doesn't go to any service. The tool is something you can run even in your laptop if you want to run local models, or you can redirect it to calling some APIs if you're only using APIs right now. But the main idea is that it should come up with some metrics that tell you how well the model performed on your specific task. So this is the Lumigator part. The blueprints part is, at least apparently for now, very disconnected, but at some point there will be kind of a conjunction of the two type of works. But what blueprints do now is making available different pipelines, let's say composite solutions to different kind of problems, very high level problems. I can give you an example. One is document to podcast, for instance, the one that Notebook.LM was very trendy about a few months ago. It does the same just using open source software, for instance. And another one is BYOTA itself. So the main idea is making these pipelines available for people to try, tinker, and play with and build new stuff on. And again, make them available as open source, but also give all of them some kind of structure that is preserved among different blueprints. And this is done in a very, let's say, systematic way. There is a template, a blueprint template on GitHub that you can use as a template to start your own project. And it will give you already all the scaffolding. So there is one blog post that I'm writing in my spare time. I hope it will not take much before it comes out. That's like how I transformed BYOTA into a blueprint, because I think it would be useful for people to understand what it entails, right? And the main reason why I liked doing that was that with the blueprint template, you're kind of forced to give some structure to what you did, to add, unit tests to your code, to add good documentation, prepare a demo that people can try. And I think open source is just like keeping a cookie jar open and letting people like pick up cookies whenever they want. But if you keep the cookie jar like in your kitchen, in your house, you can even leave your house door open, but probably not a lot of people are coming in just to pick up cookies from your kitchen. Using something like blueprints is kind of taking the cookie jar and putting it out, maybe not on the sidewalk with probably people would not take cookies from a cookie jar on the sidewalk. Like having a small table with a scout girl saying we're not selling cookies, we're giving them for free, and then people might pick up cookies at that point. This is what you do. Like you make the open source tool that you're building like more accessible to other people. And I also like to think about the fact that given they don't serve a single task, it's not a single model, it's more like a solution to a set of problems. I hope they will start gathering some people around this willing to learn about that specific family of problems. And of course, this is very ambitious because it's not like people just come in flocks and start working on something that has been newly created. But I very much champion this idea of having an artifact around which kind of a community of practice can gather around and learn together.
Right. I'm sure as just a social media user and how we interact these days, we interact so much in the digital space, but I think few of us are satisfied, are happy with the experience, right? Doom scrolling is even invented. This new vocabulary. So it just goes to show how an online experience has been for many people, and having to make a difference and kind of change the way things are going. I think that's what BYOTA is set out to do, isn't it? I can't wait to see a world where social media is working for you. And I can't wait to see kind of social media posts that are actually relevant and meaningful to me. And I get to see things that I care. The overall experience would be so much better. So I really do hope BYOTA can attract builders.
Thank you. I hope so too, honestly. And I think there are like nice application aside from the simple timeline experience. And some of them I thought about because I had people already engaging with the repository, opening issues or contacting me and asking questions. And some of the main trends now are I would like to see what you see in the notebook, like reflected back into my application. So let's say I would like to be able to just click on my algorithm and see the different timeline in my application, which would be great. And this is why I'm trying to focus now on a protocols, not platforms approach first. So I would like to engage with people working on the protocols themselves and try and see if we can find a good solution that scales easily with different kind of clients and everything. To keep on the email server metaphor is I would like to contact people that work on the email protocol or have the email servers so that we can think about how to include extra information from the users. And I think at least at the protocol level, the AP Proto by Blue Sky is probably leaning in that direction. But I don't want to ignore Mastodon. Like Mastodon is my very first priority at the moment, and I think it's very important to think in this direction.
Last two questions. What kind of advice do you have for parents who want their kids to be familiar with AI technology, but worrying about its implications, such as not being able to think on their own for the kids? Or plagiarizing, or someone who's looking to explore the space of AI. What kind of advice do you have for the people who are unsure about how to approach AI?
Wow, well, that's a deep and interesting question, and I kind of relate because I also have two kids, and I think it's very, very relevant for me. So I would say the first suggestion I would give is like for parents to try and understand the technology that they want their kids to be exposed to. And it's AI now, it would have been search engines just a few years ago, right? Why do you trust what the search engine tells you when you search for something? And this kind of critical approach to things is something that you should bring over to AI. The fact that it's AI doesn't mean that it's gonna tell you the right stuff all the time. So
Right.
you should be very careful about these before entrusting AI as a way for people to solve problems. And then there are another couple of factors which are more related to, I think, learning. There's one thing you say that resonated a lot with me about like thinking with their own minds. And you can tell from people like using social networks as a news source that
Right.
like how their minds think is very much impacted by that. And I think
Yes.
we could expect a kind of work in a similar way because at some point the business goal of these AIs will be to have users use them more or have users be exposed to ads or I don't know. Like as long as they stay as a closed tool use as kind of a black box or service that users are exposed to, I can see the risks in using them that way. And there's another thing about like learning. One thing I realized, like with my kids going to school, is it's not very much important about what you learn specifically, which you could learn even by asking an AI and letting the AI tell you, but it's also what you learn about learning. So I did my high school years. My high school was a humanistic studies high school. I studied ancient Greek and Latin, and then I went and did computer engineering, which was completely unrelated. But I didn't really feel like I was missing a lot, except from some linear algebra stuff that I had to repeat a few times. But I think I actually had a good understanding about how I could learn new things that I didn't know about. Just because some of the things I learned in Greek or Latin or philosophy, whatever, I kind of understood what I had to kind of assume as a dogma at that moment and go ahead with it and then learn the other stuff and maybe come back to it. Like all this process, which is a meta process, is something that you're not given if you just have a response from your question, right?
Right.
And still related to this learning part, I think there's another thing that the more things you learn, even in terms about the process itself, the more you can reuse them for the following tasks. Things, I don't know, you learn riding a horse, you can reuse them by doing circus, acrobatics, or I did both. This is why I can say. But, or things that you learn in dance are also good for juggling or whatever. There's a lot of intersections between the things that you do. And if you just have the responses to your problems, what you're missing are also all of these intermediate parts. So think about AI to solve a coding problem, for instance. It's great because your problem is solved in a very short time, but you will still depend on the AI to solve the following one unless you go and study what it told you to do. And what I fear is that we lose the ability of solving problems if something else is solving them for us. And we're probably not going to see us like adults right now immediately, but our kids might realize this part at a later stage.
Right. Yeah, what you say really resonated with me about learning something and taking it as it is and then going back and then review that learning process. That's what learning is all about. It's about re-examining things that you have learned and based on what your experience and new information and to go back and rethink about what you have learned. That's just something that you probably wouldn't experience with AI, just simply asking questions. That is so true. And that's what makes learning fun, actually, going back and forth and
Probably,
thinking.
yes. Like I can say this like in hindsight, at the time it was tragic, but that's also part of growing, right? So I don't think I just became more boring. I'm also more fulfilled by the things that I learn every day. And I'm still learning a lot because this whole LLM field is something that did not exist until a few years ago. So I couldn't have studied it beforehand. But I think a lot of what I did before helps me now understand how things are going. And if you want to be able to like interpret or more generally make informed decision about stuff in your life, I think continuing to learn is something that is always going to be helpful for you.
So now we're at the end of this conversation. What kind of advice do you have for those who are looking to reimagine progressing when it comes to technology? Is the future Fediverse or open source or just kind of?
So it's difficult to summarize everything. If I had to do it in just 2 words, it would be think small, just as a brand. But trying to kind of expand this a little bit, it would be like challenge what you're told. And try and understand how things work and build on top of what the others do and allow others to build on top of what you did. I think these are pretty good starting points. And the rest, well, probably up to improvisation, I guess.
Great, wonderful. And how do people find information about BYOTA and Mozilla? I guess Mozilla.ai is such a wonderful name.
Yes, I think Mozilla.ai is probably the easiest way to remember where to start.
Okay.
And then from there, you will find BYOTA in the blueprints part, but you will also find the Lumigator, so you can find a lot of extra information.
Thank you. And I'll link everything in the show notes and including your talk as well.
Thank you so much. Yes, and if there's also my Fediverse handle, like my Mastodon handle, that's perfect. Like people can follow me or reach out to me if you want to work like on personal recommender systems, personal timelines. Reach out to me. I'm very happy to have a chat.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. What did you think of today's conversation? I hope you walked away with something new. My discussion with Davide highlighted how companies like Mozilla.ai are championing open source AI that is accessible to everyone. The exciting part is that we all have the opportunity to shape the future of our digital world together. These tools are readily available right now, whether you want to create something new or make more informed choices about the technology you use. After our conversation about AI today, I hope you have gained new perspectives on how to navigate its challenges. Especially if you're a parent, helping your children understand and use these technologies responsibly.
I would love to hear your thoughts on what this conversation made you think about. I'm Kathleen Chu, and this has been Progress Reimagined. Join us next time as we continue to explore innovative ideas, technologies, and emerging economic models that put humanity and our planet first.